for some context, I gave a talk at Sotheby's. It was in front of like 200 people. And at the end, people still came up to me and were like, I didn't even know that there was like art on like in NFT form. I just thought it was like the apes. And so they were really fascinated to hear like in the NFTs there are artists and they are engaging with this work in an interesting way. And this computer art didn't just come out of nowhere. It actually has a long, history.
Hey everyone, Kevin Rose here. Welcome to another episode of Proof. I'm thrilled to be joined by Dmitri Cherniak, one of the world's most well-known and respected generative artists. Dimitri is, of course, known for Ringers, just a fantastic legendary drop when it came out, and still insanely collectible. Also, the Eternal Pump, the Rapture, Dead Ringers, the edition that he did, which just fed a ton of kids in New York. Through his philanthropic efforts, which is amazing. We get into that as well. And then his brand new collection of 100 pieces called Light Years, which is just this fantastic blend of digital and analog. Dimitri is one of my favorite creative minds in this space. Let's chat with him. Dimitri, it is so great to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's an honor to be back. I actually really don't like podcasts that much, to be honest, but I had a really nice time last time I was on, and I felt like I got to explain a lot of great details and context, and so I'm making an exception for you once again.
I appreciate that, man. It was great to get a little geeky, a little technical last time, and just really understand and spend some time talking about the why behind this stuff. We're big fans here on the show of no floor talk. I mean, every once in a while on a variety show or something, but when I'm interviewing an artist, I really want to get to the core of what drives them. And you are certainly at the top of my list of generative artists in terms of people that when they're doing something new, like, let's get on the show and talk about it. This sounds great. So I'm very excited. Obviously, just to catch people up, the last time we had you on, I can't remember what the price of Ringers were, but they were very inexpensive as to where they are today. Since then, You have absolutely exploded as a generative artist, and are being collected by funds now, not even individuals, like institutional buyers. It seems like are coming in and collecting your work. Congratulations on all this success. It's been really great to watch.
Thanks. It's definitely been a bit of a weird thing. It's not something I kind of expected, but for the past few years, I have been trying along with many other of my friends to try to kind of get generative art out there to a larger audience. And since the last time we were on too, Moonbirds has become something else. So a lot has happened. Let's be honest.
It's been crazy for both of us, I guess. Yeah, it's been nuts. But I would love to do a quick little overview and touch on a couple of the pieces that you did prior before we jumping into your new thing. I mean, obviously, we covered Ringers in depth last time. The Eternal Pump, also a fantastic collection that you did. Can you just do a quick little kind of overview and walk us through after Ringers, what happened, and bring us up to speed?
Yeah. So, pretty closely after Ringers, I launched the Eternal Pump, and partially it's because, I was talking to a friend of mine and they were like, okay, great. You had one successful project. Like, can you do another? Like, is it, or is that it? Is this just like a one-time thing, or, is there something else? And so I was like, no. It's like, let's prove it out that, generative art is here and people are interested. And I think with this one, there was, the reality is there was a lot of kind of tongue in cheek about this kind of market, this crypto market. So I like to joke that the, kind of ultimate meta of crypto art is kind of the market itself. And the Eternal Pump is a reference to that. There was a lot of kind of memes back in the day about, these coins pumping and things. And so it was a bit of a joke for me. And when it came out, things were very different as to where they were now. It was launched on Art Blocks, a random drop, and it was basically immediately sold out. And I actually got a lot of hate for it from people. They were like, "This is ruining Art Blocks. This is, I don't blame Dimitri, but like, And so what I kind of turned it around to was basically saying, all right, this is a small set of artworks, and they're very special to me. And so anyone who has one of these gets to play games, or weird ideas that I have that maybe don't make sense as a larger edition. But if I have weird, fun ideas, you get to play around, and I've kind of gotten to know all of the holders as well. And so it's a very, very interesting group. Really, really solid, fascinating group of folks who have eternal pumps. And so it's been actually really, really wonderful. I actually don't have a Discord for anyone except for pump holders. And it's really like the opposite of everything else you see in the crypto space. It's calm and serene and very thoughtful. And so I'm actually very grateful to have kind of developed this relationship with a lot of those collectors.
Dimitri, I will say that there was not many people thought of community like this when you were doing this, because the general consensus at the time, and I fell into this, well, I didn't necessarily fall into this trap because I didn't open it up. You had to hold one of our proof passes to get in, or a Moonbird to get in, but it was generally the bigger your Discord, the better, right? Like, let's just open it up. If I'm an artist, I should welcome everyone in and try and sell them on my artwork. And you've done some really cool things it's like you produce beautiful art, but then you also tie some fun little social aspects to it as well. So you created a very awesome little niche group here. And then when we get into the Rapture, that was one of the very amazing kind of just these little, what would you just call it? It's like an experiment in a social experiment in some sense.
I think it's a social experiment, but then also just kind of like a mirror on this into this situation. And so what I will say is that I think that it's more fun to be an artist than to be a CEO. And when you get some kind of attention, you can make a lot of decisions with what you want to do. And, I pretty early on tried to pull back and think, what's my long-term goal with this, and I basically decided, I'm not going to be a CEO. I am going to be an artist, and I am going to think about the medium, the blockchain, the culture that's evolved, and try to engage with it in an interesting way. And, with regards to the Rapture, that was my first experiment for pump holders. We were in the middle of the craziest time I think I can imagine. People were doing art blocks drops and funding, a decade or 2 decades of studio work as an artist. And I was a little scared. I thought about it, and people were just like, you should do a drop, like it'll be crazy. And I was trying to think of something I could do that would engage with what was going on, but at the same time, show that there's something more to this than just trying to sell 1,000 pieces and engaging with what was going on in a critical way. We also then come into this whole kind of back and forth dynamic with that exists in the traditional art world too, with collectors and artists, and often with a gallery in between. And I just wanted to show how with the blockchain, the artist can have power and can make a statement, and using this cryptographically public verified database, you can make a point that you can say, I, as the artist, am, I understand what's going on, but also like this is not for flipping. And I am going to make this available to holders of this artwork. And if they can, if these, whatever, 35 to 50 degens cannot flip an NFT for a year, it will be locked at this edition size. But if they try to profit in any way, it kind of opens up to a much larger edition size. And I think that for me, my three art blocks projects are very much, they were all in one year and they were very much kind of this series. Aesthetically, they all kind of tie together. And this was, me going through this experience that I had, the insanity of the past year, and trying to make a statement, but also, help people engage and realize like, wow, this is just weird. This is crazy. And so far, it's been almost 11 months. So December 17th is when the 1 year happens. And so I just want to point out here, total volume, 0 ETH,
Hmm.
infinite floor or no floor, and 0% listed, for a NFT set, that's just kind of unheard of. And so I'm really, really happy, and I really wanted it to stay this way. Obviously, you never know what's going to happen. So when we started, I was speaking with Eric Snowfro, the founder of Artblocks, and he was like, "This isn't going to last a month." He says a month. I think he said like a day. But we managed to get through, and the craziest thing is that um, some of these were in the hands of a fund that went under and is being liquidated. And so everyone was paranoid. What is going to happen to the Rapture? Because are they going to move them? Like how? And what's really crazy to me, and what I mean, first off, that just makes I never expected that to happen, but it makes the story even crazier. But what's even more amazing to me is that they began to move the NFTs in the collection, but they did not move their raptures. So
Crazy.
this giant fund that was being liquidated did not move their raptures, which
But aren't they going through bankruptcy right now? So couldn't there be a court order to actually transfer them to a different wallet?
maybe, I don't
But it
know
would
the
have to be really
details.
soon.
I don't know the details, but as of right now, the liquidators have decided that it's in the best interest, I guess, of the whoever the recipients might be, that the raptures do not move.
So
So,
let's quickly just run people through this chain of events. Then, so if you had an internal pump, which there were 50 of, you were eligible to receive a rapture.
yeah,
If you received a rapture, then we're only talking 50 here in total. So
yeah.
50 in total. Now, if any of the raptures were listed, was it listed as well or
Listed,
sold?
moved, sold. So any kind of movement or an attempt to kind of financialize the artwork directly on these marketplaces.
Crazy. So if
Um,
someone's wallet was hacked and one was listed or sold, you would have
yes.
what and then what that would have done, just so people know, is you had this algorithm sitting here waiting in the wings. It only produced 50 items, but then that would turn it live and there would be 666. So essentially diluting the entire collection, right?
So you could say that. I will say I thought about this deeply such that I do think the series would support 600 well, but also work and you'd get a diverse set for 50. Obviously, with long form generative art, sometimes with 50 you won't see everything. You need that, 1%, 2%, less than 1% chance that something magical happens to get this kind of output that really, I think, show highlights a lot of the beauty that's possible in generative art. So in this case, it was, I wanted to have this diversity in the 50, but also, handle a 600 output and feel like, okay, this is, not, these are not just the same.
Yeah, these are just stunning though. They're absolutely beautiful, and an argument could be made though. I don't know. It's probably silly, but an argument could be made that if you were the one that triggered the whole thing to happen, that your piece would then be a little bit more, famous for having triggered the entire set and more valuable. Or I don't know. I don't know.
There's a
I'm just
lot
making this up,
there's
but
a lot of little things. I've heard whispers of people, people being like, well, maybe I'll do this, I'll be the hero, I'll do these things. My take is always, I want to keep it at this. I think the idea, if you zoom out from where we were at, the idea that, a bunch of degens didn't flip an NFT for a year, I think that's pretty hilarious. I think holding up a mirror to the ecosystem, and I don't there, there's nothing else like it.
yeah, I love it. It's a fascinating experiment, and I'll be watching all the way down to the last second. You need to have a countdown clock somewhere. Do you have that or no?
Maybe I should do that. And then yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. It's, there's I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I feel pretty good so far that we've lasted this long.
I'm curious, when you think of the Eternal Pump, you said these 50 collectors you've gotten to know quite well. You consider this, I'm putting words in your mouth here. I think in that it's like a playground to experiment or offer these collectors something unique. You did that with the Rapture. Are there plans for that in the future? Like if someone were to purchase one of these Eternal Pumps, can they consider this kind of like your membership to other experiments that you do later down the line?
Yeah, that's kind of the point that I've made with the Eternal Pump, and partially I think just because the name and kind of all the context around it, it's like, this is where, if I have interesting ideas, fun ideas that maybe aren't necessarily fit for, you know, um, a release like the Light Years project, which, we can talk more about in a bit, but I think that for me, this is where the fun takes place. This was, at the time, Art Blocks called it the playground. And so I thought of it
Mm.
as, this is the playground for fun ideas. And it's small enough that, I can do things manually. I like to say that, my art is about automation. Automation is an artistic medium, but the pumps are kind of the opposite in everything, because it's small enough that I can do everything manually.
That's awesome. I did want to touch on. I definitely want to jump into light years right away, but I did want to touch on a couple of things that I caught you saying in the last few minutes. You mentioned a time where people were angry at you for doing this drop, and then also, you said scared at one point. What was going on? Were people pissed off that artists were making money? Like, take me back to that time. Like, what happened in that world?
I mean, I think that it was a surprise drop, but people had a sense of when it was going to happen. And on Art Blocks, it was a bit absurd because it was a 2 ETH drop. And at the time, that's not really what was going on Art Blocks. I mean, now, obviously, like almost any project, it might, sell out at that price. These much larger ones, and so I think that people missed it because it was a surprise, kind of a surprise drop, and they just didn't like it. And I don't know what to say. It was more that for me, if I couldn't control everything. It was more a testament that, wow, there's a lot of people engaging in this. Like for me, that was like where Art Blocks changed. Like for me, I was like, wow, this is really something, because it sold out in like 2 minutes, and it was just so fast and so intense, and there was a lot of botters and things like that trying to get in, and so it was just for me, it was a big change from what had happened before.
How do you, as an artist, deal with the negativity that can come from, say, crypto Twitter or the internet in general? Like, how is that difficult to handle?
It's definitely been strange. There's a lot of speculators, a lot of people using anonymous accounts, which I don't have a problem with. It's just more, I'm a real person, and I think it's changed actually a lot since then. Like, there's a lot more people who are now have engaged with generative art in a way where they aren't speculators as much anymore. Like early on in art blocks, I remember there were people who got laid off during COVID and they were like, this is better than working, a shitty job. Like I can flip NFTs. And then they learned about art blocks and they were like, oh wow, this is real. Like this is not just something. This is like uh as someone who's maybe more technically savvy or more online, this is kind of this creative and cultural space that engages with technology and the blockchain in a way that actually elevates what I'm thinking about. And so I think that we were at that point, but also, there's traders who think of them as essentially tokens, and they are, willing to do or say what it takes to try to make money on it. And so I've learned to deal with it a bit. I don't have any notifications on anything. I only see,
That's wise.
notifications from people who follow me, and so I only, um, I only when I search out the kind of like public stuff do I see it. But then, I've also got to bond with a lot of artists who have gone through similar things, and
Yeah.
I also remember too in art blocks, just after the drops, it was so intense. And so after my drop, there wasn't really anyone I could talk to. But then, after Archetype, I feel like, oh, I could talk to Chettle. And I felt like even like just talking with them, it made me feel better. Like, it was like, oh, there's other people who are kind of experiencing this craziness. And so now I think there's a strong kind of community to kind of help artists navigate that and be kind of savvy. And I have a Drake quote that I like, which is just a wise man once said nothing at all. Why let the story run if it's false? A wise man once said nothing at all. And so I kind of know when people say stuff, I kind of know the truth, and I'm as long as I'm kind of happy with that, I'll let them say what they need to say.
Yeah, I love that. I always think about some of the comments that you see on Twitter, and you just never know where the just where the intent is coming from. Sometimes it could be from something that's not even related to you. It's just they're having a bad day in some other capacity of their life, right? And it's just manifesting through that particular moment in time. And so I always try and view it through that lens, and that tends to soften it a bit for me. So I'm curious, when you decided to approach this new project, Light Years, where has your research led you? It seems like you are a student of art. You're a student of generative art. This style is it's a well, actually, let's just talk about how you got to Light Years
Yeah.
and who the artist is behind this that inspired you.
Yeah. So for me, I would say Light Years is a new series of work that I spent a fair bit of time in deep research, but also I feel like it's something that will help people understand more about generative art. And people, this is an artist. So Laszlo Moholy-Nagy is, he was a Jewish artist from, Europe. He was basically one of the instructors at the Bauhaus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things you can say about him, but the thing that I really appreciate about him is that he was always engaging with new technology, new industrial materials, and just always experimenting. And I think
Hmm.
what I there's I mean, look, I love like constructivism. He was a constructivist. He did a lot of work with constructivist painting, um, but also kind of the kind of Bauhaus approach, the idea of taking this kind of like whole study, putting it together and experimenting with all these different aspects. You know, the idea of treating not like art not as like high art or low art, and the idea that art can make people's lives better, I really resonated with. And in particular, the idea that technology can be more than an economic or political lever, but actually a cultural and creative force. And so, in my background, in engineering, I spent a lot of time automating interesting processes that I would say, like, wow, this is a creative process. But the general public might think this is boring, this is robotic, and where's the creativity? And so I really resonate with him as an artist, saying like, no, we actually have to embrace technology and embrace the creativity, and use these new industrial materials or new technologies, and help push that forward. Because if we don't, it's going to be a huge problem. And I think that he was right. We now often don't think of technology as a cultural or creative force, but rather as an economic lever and a political lever. And I think that that is bad for society. Like, I think that using technology to make art is the way that we are moving as people become more technologically savvy and competent. And so we're not really exposing the world or people to those opportunities. And so I think that he was spot on, and I really appreciate the aesthetics of his work. And I was really honored, someone fellowship, they gave me the opportunity to meet his estate. And so the project, it didn't just I think it came together kind of naturally. At first they were kind of like, do you want to do a collaboration with Laszlo Moholy-Nagy? And I was like, well, he's dead, so I can't do a
Right.
collaboration with him. But obviously I love the artist, and I'd read some of their books before. And so I was like, obviously I love the artist, I think they're really special. And they were like, well, do you want to speak to his estate just to like learn more about the artist and see things firsthand? And so it was almost like my own personal art school. And I know we spoke about this a bit last time. Like, when I was growing up, the idea of going to art school never made sense to me financially. Like, it was just an impossibility. And so I was like, wow, this is like, I get to almost firsthand, through his daughter, um, Hatula, who is like unbelievable. She and his grandson, Daniel. I got to go and visit their archives in Ann Arbor, where they have all these clippings. I got to read like 10 books on him or by him. I got to, see the actual paintings that the estate has in Zurich. So we got to go to Zurich and see kind of, where his daughter lived, and see some of these paintings they have locked away, and learn more about the process. And it was incredibly inspiring. And ultimately, I think for me, it became a project that was so much bigger than I thought it would be. I I feel like it definitely the first half was kind of amazing, and then at the end it was almost like a nightmare. Just for kind of my life kind of devolved into chaos, but ultimately, I don't know. I'm just so happy with the outputs. If you don't know, Fellowship generally works with photographers. And so Moholy-Nagy is very well respected as a photographer because he played with what are known as photograms. So making pictures outside of a camera, basically blocking this photographic paper with shapes and forms, and then you actually develop it and you get a photograph. But it was not you know, it was not, it was about creating like abstract art.
Hmm.
It was something very new. It was using this technology as a focus on art, not capturing, photorealistic things or landscapes. And so it was very much this experimental process. And so it took, I didn't just right away decide, okay, like, oh, we're going to do this project. It's going to be this thing. I got to research a lot, dig in, and then it kind of came together, I think, fairly organically. The idea of doing an homage to Moholy-Nagy and, with generative art. So we got to use the technology and then develop these silver gelatin prints. So this is kind of the I think what tied it all together. We got to go back and create these analog photographs tied, which really kind of ties it all together, everything together that kind of Moholy-Nagy was working on. So we were making photographs outside of the camera in a generative system, and then actually getting to print them out and develop them. And I just felt, um, I just feel really great about the set of artworks and how it all came out. I also got to work with one of the top photo printers, and that was a really interesting experience because my work is generally digital work, but they kind of helped me understand, all right, how do we take digital work and make it analog, and how do we make sure that everything is perfect. And this I worked with a studio called Hanks Photographic. Steve Rifkin is the owner, and he's been printing photos for like 40 years. And he's normally, I would say, like the secret weapon of these photographers. But in my opinion, I was like, we should share this process because Steve, I'm not a photographer who's trying to like, hide anything. I was like, we should share what is going on at Hanks Photographic because Steve has built, over 30 or 40 years, all of this tooling to help him, create art. And so I would say like really, really interesting little things. Like he has all this old analog equipment, but he's built ways to like optimize it. So you can guarantee, this is parallel with the wall when you're projecting, through the film, or, how do you print digital files onto film? Even when it comes down to developing, so you project through the negative onto a piece of photoreactive paper, and then you dip that in a film developer. And even the setup that they have, he was like, I was trying to imitate it if you were like a photographer dipping it in with one hand. So they built this whole kind of machine setup to be able to do this with giant pieces of paper. So I just felt it was really important to highlight what he had done as well. And I didn't even mention this, but we put together a 9-minute kind of mini documentary, which you can watch on the homepage of the project.
Highly
And
recommend watching it. It's just fascinating. Well, it's insanely well shot and edited too. It's beautiful.
yeah, I was really, yeah, fellowship really helped me do a great job on that. When we started the project, I kind of brought up the idea, and I was like, I'm not really that comfortable on camera, but I feel like this will help people understand more about generative art. And so one of the things that was important to me about this project too was, can we help connect, um, art history through the 20th century to what is going on in generative art now? Because I still think there's a lot of people who don't quite get it. Um, for some context, I gave a talk at Sotheby's. It was in front of like 200 people, and at the end, people still came up to me and were like, "I didn't even know that there was like art on like in NFT form. I just thought it was like the apes." And so they were really
It's
fascinated
amazing.
to hear like, "Oh wow, like this." like in the NFTs, there are artists and they are engaging with this work in an interesting way. And this computer art didn't just come out of nowhere. It actually has a long, history.
I'm so sorry, Dimitri, that I added to that to that pool of. No, moonbirds are fun, but it's definitely not helping on the PFP side. Let people know that there's more art. I guess we're helping on the proof side, doing the
Yeah.
grails and the other things that we do. But yeah, that's crazy that people still they just had no clue. They just always thought it was just the PFP projects.
So I think, we're getting there, and you're starting to see like curators at museums are getting promoted to be, full curators and getting to do these interesting projects. There was just an article in the New York Times written by Zach Small, and they were just highlighting like, oh, the MoMA is engaging with NFTs. Oh, Albright Knox Gallery in Buffalo is engaging with NFTs. So, or LACMA, is starting to engage with NFTs, and so it's it's nice to see that the curators who are experts in kind of digital art and that history are now starting to, people are like, oh wow, you were right about this stuff. It's not just this thing, and they're starting to let them work and highlight really interesting art. So part of this project was part of this project is that it was also shown at Paris Photo, which is the largest kind of photo fair in the world. And to be honest, at first I didn't really know that much about it. I don't necessarily engage in like the photo art world, but the folks at Fellowship do, and they recommended we should submit this there because it's really powerful, and I think people would like to see it, and it's quite interesting. And little did I know, the curators for the whole fair, it's the JP Morgan curation track, selected light years as one of 20 things that they put it in their brochure that you have to see.
Oh
So
wow.
there's like thousands and thousands of works at the fair, and they selected light years as one of them. And so what that meant was this audience of traditional collectors were kind of forced to engage with generative art and NFTs. And I think that a lot of them might not have even known that these were NFTs. So it was really, I really didn't understand how impactful that would be to get this out in front of the audience. And again, they know who Moholy-Nagy is. He is a legend. Most of his work is in museums. It doesn't go up for auction. It's just in museums.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
they know kind of the legacy of Moholy-Nagy, and it was really really an honor to kind of be able to put that together. And I'm really glad to see that people appreciated that kind of lineage that I was trying to kind of pull forward and
That
showcase.
that's my question for you is when I think about you, going in there, studying his work, reading his books, you know, it's not a collaboration. You said it's an homage. What elements along the way did you write down? Did you make notes of? Did you decide to carry into this work to do the homage here? Like
So
yeah, what did you find? What did you discover? What were you excited? What excited you?
So again, for some context, like, I have this book here written by his wife about his life, but I just want to show you this just because, you might appreciate just this is from 1932. So you can see just right off the bat, like the
Hmm.
Ringers-esque,
Oh,
kind of like these
absolutely.
forms and things. And so, him and I are very much aligned on an aesthetic level. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
what the core element of light years is actually they're two things, and I've kind of molded them together. So a lot of his early work um, focuses on technology, or like whatever the technology of the day is even. So in the 20s, he would often do work that highlights telephone wires and poles and train
Hmm.
tracks because that was the modern technology of his day. And so the core of light years is actually uh, kind of printing these kind of train tracks. They look like you might be able to see it gets a little messy, and that was kind of something I played around with. But they are essentially train tracks with the trusses kind of going a little wild. And so that is the core element. And then when they get distorted, they can also kind of appear like telephone towers and telephone wires. And
Mm.
so that is the core of the algorithm. A lot of his early works, in
This one
particular,
here, for example, what would you say? Are those the telephone wires?
yeah. So basically, what's going on is you have there's about um, there's two larger, you can see these lines that kind of run not exactly parallel because there's a perspective shift, but like there's and then there's lines between them. Yeah. And so that is kind of a distorted form of these train tracks, but when they get pinched together, they might kind of look like telephone wires as well. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of an homage. There's two pieces in particular. Crossing diagonals is the main one. That was like the main inspiration. And I think if you go to in conversation on the page, um, you might be able to see more those actual pieces. So in the
Oh,
top
and the
right,
in conversation. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's totally. And that was at Palais Photo the mock up.
Beautiful.
So these two here in particular. So those are kind of the core ideas that I was kind of working with, and then I included lots of other elements. So we there's a big focus on kind of these circles, which again he used in his constructivist work, but then also from his photographs from radio towers, he would often have a lot of these very straight lines, and then there might be some big circle, which kind of adds a lot of calmness to the piece. It makes it feel softer, and so that's another element.
You said in the interview at one point that there was something about his kind of signature of an equal
Yeah.
sign or something like that.
So
Because I noticed that in a lot of the gallery, there's almost like these equal signs kind of floating around. Can you tell me more about that piece?
yeah. So and this really ties into the blockchain stuff as well. So the state has to deal with a lot of forgeries. And so, one of the ways they can kind of verify what if the art is real or not is he started, signing his name with an equal sign, like instead of a dash between Moholy-Nagy. And so it was really funny hearing them talk about like, oh yeah, that it wasn't an equal sign, or it was, or during this time it was. And they also got to show me kind of like the backs of all the paintings, which is where all the provenance is. Like, where has this been? Where is it shown? And so for me, I wanted to use that equal sign, or variations of these stacked lines as kind of like an homage to his signature. And so sometimes you might see two, or you might see three, but just kind of tying that in. Um, and I also, there's a few other elements. The core of the algorithm um, are these kind of train track like figures, and then you have what I call inversions, which is like in photography, flipping of the black and the white. Uh, so here, you can see kind of a bunch of rectangular shapes that are inverted, and you can see the colors flip from black to white and white to black.
Hmm.
And so that was just for me trying to capture some of the elements in photography, in particular silver gelatin print, and to showcase, some of the beauty. There's also, there's shapes like that, and then there's also cutouts. So that's the inversion, but like around, particular shapes. So it's kind of more form fitting. And then There's also just some graininess, which is there to try to um, the graininess and kind of the shadowing is just I wanted to be able to capture some of that beauty that is found in the silver gelatin prints, and I felt like that would help, make these work um, in this format. And basically, a lot of that is just done by stacking the forms, making them bigger and bigger. So you might have one, train track that's kind of printed on, but underneath it, sorry, you have ones where the lines are thicker but slightly more transparent, and then it starts to build up. And as you move more, you get this kind of interesting kind of shadow or graininess.
I'm really curious. When we think about, just traditional NFTs, you think, okay, you've created NFT, you've written it in, what did you do this one?
JavaScript.
Is this P5JS or is this?
No, I don't use P5.js normally. Actually, I use React, um, which is a library that makes it really easy when you change state to basically just update everything, and it's reactive kind of programming. And so for me as an artist, um, a lot of this project, like the core algorithm, actually I had pretty early, but a lot of the beauty in that final outputs that were captured is almost as much me being able to dig through all the parameters and manipulate kind of the aspects of the algorithm to get a specific output. And so one of the things that I'm actually going to do with this project, and I haven't done this before, but I think it's really interesting, is that the earlier bidders will get a process work as an NFT as well, because the this project took 6 months, so I have a lot of iterations of other work, and at the core, the algorithm of these train tracks is not so different, but the outputs that you'll see are very different, and that is mostly just from parameters being changed. It's
Mhm.
not, a whole new algorithm or a whole new thing. It's just me having this core algorithm and figuring out how to manipulate it and distort it to finally come to an output where I was like, this is it.
That's so cool. And when people are bidding on this, like, how is this going to work? I've heard you mention several times these silver gelatin prints. Was that a part of the creation process, or did the algorithm create the NFT and then you went and had them printed
So
afterwards? Like, how did that all play? How did that work?
So actually, the really fun thing here is that we had normally my NFTs are digital work, right? It's kind of the act of the code running and creating the output, which is kind of the interesting concept. But in this case, what we did is we created the digital files and then we printed them with this kind of special machine onto film negatives. So you have this analog film negative, and then we scan that, and that is going to be the actual file in the NFT. So
Very
you're
cool.
not getting this raw digital file, you're actually getting an analog representation, um, which is what the NFT is going to be. And
Crazy. So you went digital, film, digital, basically,
yes,
to the whole.
and so it means that, look, even if you have the seed, right, to this algorithm, you're not
Yeah.
going to get the exact same output. Like, look, it'll be structurally the same, but the grain, all that stuff, it's not going to be exactly the same. And so it was one of those things that I thought was really important because, trying to tie this back to the photogram and Moholy-Nagy and kind of this very influential thing he did in the photography space.
So some of the graininess and warmth is not actually the algorithm, but the fact of converting it to taking it through the film processing. Is that correct?
Yes, and that was a whole process itself, understanding, what resolution do you need these digital files? Like, what will happen? Do we want to use this film? How large do we want to make the film negatives? Because, if you make them different sizes, you might, how large you want to project them onto the silver gelatin, you might get more graininess. What paper, and so that was where it was really wonderful to work with an expert who could help guide me through all of that.
So cool. So 100 unique NFT artworks, each accompanied or complemented by a physical silver gelatin print. So you get the print as well.
Yeah.
You've already generated them and done this, obviously, because you had to run them through the analog process. So you can get to see them all on the gallery. And many of them we've been showing today in this video, but they're all on the website for you to view. This is really cool. So you're going to do this as a Dutch auction. Is that correct?
It's so Fellowship is they kind of recommended like the structure for it, but the idea is that it will be a Dutch auction, and the earlier you bid means you get to pick which one out of the 100 you like. So if you really want a specific one, you can bid earlier, and then you will be, earlier on in the queue to pick which one. And then as kind of, as appreciation, what we're going to do is the first 10 will also get to receive a framed copy of the actual film negative. So it's just like a really cool additional thing that you get to have the film negative that created this. And then the first 30 bidders will get one of those process NFTs that I mentioned. And so just, again, appreciation, and you get to have another aspect of this project and see, what it looked like before. And the other.
So when you say the process NFT, do you mean that's before it went actually analog?
Before it went analog, but also before the final kind of parameter set and algorithm. So it was like early on. So for example, the first outputs are distortions of these train tracks. And so actually that looks a lot, if you saw them, it looks a lot more like train tracks. But then there's also some really interesting outputs along the way. And it's just, I think just as a collector, you get to see how it evolved. And I'm just, as an artist, also making it clear that the actual algorithm is not so different. It's just the parameters that I've baked in to the algorithm that have changed. And so it's just, again, I think trying to highlight an aspect of generative art that people might not be as familiar with, but really appreciate how it all works. The other really cool thing that we're doing with this is that 2 of the works are reserved for institutional collectors. So if there is an institution that wants to engage with generative art or NFTs or digital work, and maybe they're not as familiar, but they understand the legacy of Moholy-Nagy and can see, how this ties together, it's an opportunity for them to get involved.
So cool. This is going to be an amazing project, and it goes live December 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, starting at 70 ETH. Price will drop by 0.2 ETH every 12 seconds. If the price reaches 10 ETH, it will remain there until the project is sold out, and I have a feeling it'll sell out well before 10 ETH. But this is really, really awesome, and it's cool that you're giving people the physical as well. Like that's going to be are they just stunning in person to look at those gelatin prints? They must just be really awesome.
So they're really amazing. The feedback at Paris Photo was unbelievable. I mean, I've seen them because I got to QA them. And it was really, really beautiful to see. I got to give some feedback and say like, I want this to be a little more like this, a little more like this. And working with the photo printer and like learning about their process to how they do that is very cool. They kind of have like their own magic to to actually develop these photos in the way that you would want, how to get a black a certain like way, or it's really, really was really interesting for me as a digital artist. I don't think I would have the patience to do that. But they truly are unbelievably talented.
It sounds like a really special place, like a kind of a dying breed type situation where, when you hear about, I've had and seen NFTs printed many times over, and it's typically big, massive, large format printers with high quality inks and high quality papers and all of that, but more of a modern approach. And it seems like this is very much a preserving old methods scenario. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that again, it was an homage, me trying to tie things back, and the train tracks and the telephone wires are kind of like a metaphor trying to tie Moholy-Nagy to where we are today. This thing that you travel, and even light years, the name of the project, it denotes a distance, right? But also, we're working with light, traveling through time and space. And for me, it was more just this idea that it may seem far away, but really we're so close, and we're creating art at the speed of light. And it all just tied up really nicely to me. Yeah.
I love it. Well, congratulations on this. It's definitely one that I'm going to be readying some ETH for. I'm really curious. One thing that comes to mind, I always wanted to ask you this, in looking at these releases that you've done, 50 here, 50 there, and then 100 now. One of the things, if you talk to the galleries and, whether it's Pace or Gagosian or some of these big galleries, and they talk about artists and their catalogs of art that they have to put out. How do you think about pacing? Because you said this is a 6-month process for you. Some people would say, hey, you need to be putting out more art. How do you feel about that?
I think that one of the really nice things about the Web3 space is that, again, artists are a bit more in control. And look, I've been very fortunate. Like, I think for me, I was at the right time at the right place, and I was speaking to generative art in a way that a lot of people could understand and appreciate. And so I feel very lucky that I was able to, have ringers. I was able to, help talk about generative art. I was able to do dead ringers, which we didn't even talk about.
Oh, we didn't talk about dead ringers.
We didn't
That's
talk
right.
about dead ringers, but that was kind of that was a that was for me, it was a celebration of the anniversary of ringers, but also trying to tie back some of this madness. Um, but um, but Dead Ringers to me was, how do you make something that is impossible, like this insane digital scarcity? I spent a month leading up to the birthday of Ringers just sending these individual outputs. Here's the grid of all of them, but I was just sending those into the ether. I was sending them to randomly generated wallets, and people were so, again, mad about that. They were like, why don't you just send it to someone that could change their life? All these things. And I was just every day generating a new one, sending it out into space, like to these random addresses. There's 16 to the
Right.
power of 40 possible addresses. The irony of this is that there were people who started creating wallets in the millions, hoping that they would get one. But
That is so crazy.
if you know about statistics, it's literally impossible. Like that's how that's like why the blockchain is secure, because the
Right.
space is just so large that cryptographically is just not possible. But like the irony of someone who is the technical savvy to generate all those wallets, not having the kind of foresight to be like, oh wait, statistically this is impossible.
Right. I mean, they have the same odds of generating the burn address, which would have more NFTs in it than any other account.
So I was doing this for a month, and then on the last day, the 1 year release of Ringers, I put together an edition where I said, you can never own a dead ringer. They're dead. Ringers are dead. Also a bit of a play when everyone's like, ringers dead, crypto dead. But you can, if you want, have this piece of work that is the opposite of kind of digital scarcity. It's an addition of 16 to the power of 40. So one for every single ETH address could get one. And I hard coded that into the contract, in the solidity, that it's like only one per address. It's such a huge number that it doesn't really make sense, but it was more for me to prove a point, because I was just sending these out. And then the other thing is that, I kind of just wanted to tie this back to, I really wanted to tie this back to what was kind of going on. So we were in the middle of the winter. It was COVID. Schools were shut down, and I don't know if you know, but in America, a lot of public schools basically serve as the place where most children get their food, like most of their food during the day. So, this
Mhm.
absurdity of what was going on with digital scarcity, and then the kind of food scarcity that literally exists in New York, where I live, I just decided, like, all right, let's send all the funds to the New York Food Bank. And so it was a 24-hour period, and there was something like 23,000 minted. And ultimately, it was 16 million meals for the New York Food Bank.
That's
And
amazing.
it changed the way that they thought about crypto donations and how everything worked. And so it was really amazing to be able to help facilitate something like that. And I think a lot of people kind of commented, like, why do people always write about the bad things that happen in the crypto community, but like no one will write about a project like this, which it's true that people don't want to write about the good things that happen, but I do think that it is possible for good things to happen. And there are people, like, not just me, like a lot of other artists doing really amazing things. Like Drifter Shoots did a
Hmm.
project where it was unbelievable. He raised a number of funds, like out of solidarity for a lot of folks who were formerly incarcerated, and just to help people kind of get back on their feet, whether legal or social. And I thought that there's so many people doing these really, really interesting, and kind of powerful statements where they're trying to give back. And so, um, yeah, people
I
outside of
love
the
that.
little bubble, people don't really talk about it, but it is there. And I encourage people to do what you can, because it really brings the community together.
So there was 23,491 of these that were minted within that 24-hour window. Look at the unique holder count, which is beautiful. 18,000, over 18,000, close to 19,000 unique holders. And just the philanthropic side of it, obviously just amazing. Thank you for doing that. But the other thing I think it's important to mention here to everyone is, one, I've seen this printed because you did these really high resolution and they look beautiful up on a wall.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that if you see, obviously, Dimitri, your smaller edition stuff is always going to be bought by serious collectors, and so that's just the place that you are. That's not your fault. Like, you're a really well known generative artist now, but here's a chance to come in, and for $27 you can own one of your NFTs, which is an amazing piece. So I love that you did this, because not only did you do it for a fantastic charitable piece, but it's also a very approachable entry point for a new collector that may be a fan of your work that wants to have and own something, which I think is equally awesome.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, whenever I launch something, like, I get some feedback being like, "Oh, is this only for whales or whatever?" And I'm just like, I put this project out there, and honestly, it's one of my. I think it might be my. I think this is better than Ringers. Like, I actually think that, as an artistic project, I'm more proud of this than I am of Ringers. And so, I always try to share that, and let folks know that this exists, and they look amazing printed. I got to print. I had to sign. I think I signed like hundreds and hundreds. So it took me a long time to sign them all. There was a period where you could claim one, and got to send them all over the world. And so now I have people send me pictures all over the world. And what's normally my art, you have generative art, and each one is unique, right? So you kind of have this unique piece. But with Dead Ringers, the thing I appreciate is you have this piece that's the same, but then you get to see, where people live, or how it's hung, or how it's framed. And so, their personality, I feel like, plays into how it's framed and displayed and shown, instead of it just being these, generative, unique pieces. So it was really nice for me to see that.
That's fantastic. Well, Dimitri, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show and just to see what you're up to, because the cool thing about everything that you launch is it's always funky and cool in some unique way. I love that about what you do. It's not just putting out another project for the sake of putting out another project and collecting more ETH. It's like it's clear in all the pieces that we talked about today. There's intentionality behind there. There's research. There's I'm sure you could crank something out amazing in 3 months and release it and make, if it was just for the sake of making funds or money, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that's clearly not what motivates you here. So thank you for that. It's fantastic to watch unfold your career unfold here over the last few years. So
thanks.
Very exciting for this release on December 1st.
Thanks. Yeah, me too. And yeah, please, even if you're not interested in taking part in any kind of auction, I would ask that you watch this documentary, because it wasn't easy for me to be in it, but I felt that it was important to kind of highlight the background and the history and what's going on.
Yeah, it's a great little 9-minute piece. It was insanely well shot and edited. Beautiful stuff. It's funny, we were talking with Mauricio, our head of all things video and audio over here. We were talking about how this is like such a great piece that is inspiration for us to what we would do with future kind of Grails related videos that we do. Really wanting to create these this can stand on its own for many years to come about this very important moment and project. And so that's kind of our hope when we talk about some of our Grails artists as well, kind of internally. People should watch this. It's lightyears.fellowship.xyz. Of course, we'll link it up in the show notes and whatnot as well. But Dimitri, congrats again. Lightyears launching December 1st, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And always great to have you on. And where can people find you if they just want to follow along with your adventures?
The easiest way is on Twitter. But again, there is no I between the D and the M. It's just DMITRI. There's a lot of scammers who are using variations of my name. So please, make sure you got the real thing. Also on Instagram. Those are the easiest ways to kind of follow along with my art.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right, that is it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you would like to help us out, head on over to proof.xyz and click on the reviews button at the very top and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much. Take care.